The first thing people should understand is that this trip didn't start with hope. It started because staying home with him had become unbearable. We were already fighting long before the car was packed, long before the road stretched in front of us, and long before I convinced myself that a few days away might calm him down. He drove the entire time, gripping the steering wheel like it belonged to him and him alone, deciding when we stopped, what we ate, and when we spoke. Every attempt at conversation ended with him correcting me, mocking me, or turning my words against me. So I learned to stay quiet and stare out the window. We stopped in a restaurant on the side of the road. The sign was old. The paint was cracked, and there were no other cars parked nearby. It didn't look closed, but it didn't look open either. It looked like time had stopped there and never bothered to come back. Inside, everything felt outdated and silent. One woman came out from the back, older, calm, and strangely attentive. She gave us menus and disappeared again. I remember thinking that if something went wrong in that place, there would be no one around to hear us. We sat there without talking, and the silence was sharp, not calm. He kept checking his phone, then watching me like he was waiting for a mistake. I focused on the menu even though I wasn't hungry, because looking at him felt dangerous. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't even open the message right away. But when I did, I smiled without thinking. It was a coworker asking if I could come to his birthday the following week. A normal message, nothing hidden, nothing inappropriate. That small smile was enough. His face changed instantly, his voice getting louder as he demanded to know who had written to me. When I told him it was someone from work, his tone turned ugly, sharp, and fast. He accused me of talking to other men, of embarrassing him, of cheating on him openly. He started shouting things that made people turn their heads, saying I was worthless, that I gave him nothing after everything he had done for me, that I didn't even deserve to be alive. He said all of this without lowering his voice, without shame, and with a look that told me he would have gone further if we were alone. He grabbed my phone and threw it into the trash like it was nothing. He leaned close and told me that during this trip, I wouldn't talk to anyone, and when we got home, we would have a serious conversation. I stood up shaking, walking toward the bathroom, and heard him yelling behind me to stop pretending and calling me a disgusting little rat. The hallway to the bathroom felt longer than it should have, and every step made me expect him to follow me, to grab me, or to drag me back to the table. Inside, I locked the door and leaned over the sink, trying to breathe without making noise. The tension built slowly because silence with him had never meant safety. I waited, listening for footsteps, for shouting, for the door handle to move, knowing from experience that privacy was something that he didn't respect. When the door finally opened, it wasn't him. It was the woman from the restaurant. She closed the door carefully and stood next to me without asking questions, as if she already knew exactly what was happening. She spoke calmly and told me about her past, about a man who hit her, humiliated her, and treated her like a servant. She explained how her life had revolved around pleasing him, feeding him, and staying quiet until she realized she was disappearing. She told me she left, that she built this place, and that no one controlled her anymore. I listened while my face burned with shame because every word felt too familiar. I told her thank you, but I said there was nothing I could do, that this was just how things were for me. She looked at me seriously and said there was something to do and that she could help. When she told me to follow her into the kitchen, my heart started racing. The kitchen was clean, quiet, and smelled like old oil and soap. She opened a cabinet and took out a small bottle with cloudy liquid, telling me this was the first ingredient to starting a new life and that it was meant for rats like him. I told her I didn't understand and that I was scared. She leaned closer and told me I didn't need to understand everything, only that she would handle what came next, that she would take responsibility, and that my only job would be to leave and never come back. The tension pressed on me as I stood there watching her hold the bottle, because every part of me knew how dangerous this was. But another part of me remembered every time he told me I was nothing, every time he hurt me and then blamed me for it. She poured the liquid into his plate slowly, without rushing, mixing it carefully into the food. Her hands didn't shake and her face didn't change. She told me it was done and that I should go back to the table and wait. Walking back felt unreal. He immediately complained about how long I had taken and asked what I was doing in there. I told him I didn't feel well and he ignored me like my words didn't matter. The food arrived quickly and he complained again, criticizing the place and the service. The woman told us to enjoy our meal, her voice steady and neutral. I couldn't eat. I watched him closely as he started eating every moment, making my chest tighten. He kept talking, kept insulting me for being quiet, accusing me of trying to make him look bad. Then his voice cut off mid-sentence. His fork slipped from his hand. His body leaned sideways and he collapsed onto the floor, hitting it hard and staying completely still. I stayed frozen in my chair, staring at him while the woman calmly looked at me and pointed toward the door. I stood up and walked out, leaving everything behind. Outside, the road was empty and the silence felt unreal. I walked without knowing where I was going, constantly expecting to hear someone shouting my name or running after me. The tension didn't fade. Every sound made me turn around. My body felt light and heavy at the same time, and my thoughts wouldn't slow down. I reached the gas station far down the road and asked to use a phone. I told them my boyfriend collapsed at a restaurant and that I didn't know what happened. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. Later, people asked questions. I told them we argued often and that he scared me. I said I left because I didn't feel safe. They said the cause was poisoning, but when they returned to the restaurant, it was closed and empty, like no one had been there in years. The fear stayed with me long after everything ended. Interviews, nights alone, and sudden noises kept me on edge, waiting for consequences that never came. No charges followed, no accusations were made, and no one could explain where the woman or the restaurant had gone. They said there wasn't enough evidence to blame anyone. I moved away, changed jobs, and stopped answering unfamiliar numbers. Even now, raised voices make my body tense automatically. People like to believe escape is loud and heroic, but sometimes it happens quietly and it leaves confusion behind. I don't feel strong or in control. I feel like someone who survived because another person chose to intervene. Some nights I still wonder how many other rats were served at that table before me.
This is the story of the most terrifying first date I ever had, which could have ended my life. Back then, I was 19, and I was pretty much in love with a guy. I had known Daniel from the neighborhood for a long time. As we grew older, we became friends, but the chemistry between us was always there. When he finally asked me out on a real date, I felt so happy and nervous at the same time. I took extra time getting ready, wanting everything to be perfect. In my mind, this was the beginning of something great. We went to dinner, and it was so romantic. The candles on the table, the quiet music, low lights. We had an amazing time till midnight. When we walked outside afterward, neither of us wanted to say goodbye. That was when he asked if I wanted to do something a little crazy together. I said yes because I was young, curious, and convinced that nothing truly bad could happen to me. He suggested going to Provo Canyon for a walk. He said he liked walking there because it helped him relax, and he talked about how clear the stars looked away from the city lights. His tone was calm, like it was something he had done many times before. We drove there together, talking the whole way, still laughing, still feeling close. When we parked on the side of the road, the darkness felt deeper than I expected, but I did not want to ruin the mood or look scared over nothing. The path was narrow and uneven, and the trees blocked almost all the light. I remember thinking that if something happened, no one would hear us, but I forced that thought away. We joked about how dumb the idea was walking into the woods on a first date, but the joke slowly faded as the darkness grew thicker. We kept going anyway. We both wanted the night to feel special. The deeper we went, the quieter it became, and our conversation slowed until it stopped completely. I noticed that we were both listening more than talking, paying attention to every small sound around us. That was when I realized we were much farther in than I had planned, and the road felt uncomfortably distant behind us. We did not say it out loud, but both of us started walking faster at the same time, as if we shared the same thought without admitting it. The silence took over everything. Then we heard a noise behind us, sharp and sudden like a branch snapping under weight. It did not sound random, and it did not sound far away. Daniel turned his head first. Then I did the same, but the darkness hit everything beyond a few feet. We kept moving faster now, pretending it was nothing, pretending this was still under control. Another sound followed, heavier than the first, and this time it felt closer, like whatever made it was following our path. Daniel stepped to the side, and his foot slid on something soft. He stopped suddenly, annoyed at first, then confused. He bent down, thinking it was mud or a dead animal, and that was when his entire body stiffened. His reaction scared me more than anything else. His face lost all color, his mouth opened, and his eyes stayed locked on the ground. When he finally spoke my name, his voice broke, and I knew something was very wrong. I looked down where he was staring, and my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. A woman's body lay twisted on the ground, damaged in ways I did not want to fully process. Parts of her were missing. I screamed desperately. Before running away, I felt something else, something worse than fear, the clear sense that we were not alone anymore. I lifted my head and scanned the trees. That was when I saw him. A man stood partially hidden among the bushes, not close enough to see clearly, but close enough that I knew he was watching us. He did not move at first. He was measuring us. The man took a slow step forward, and that single movement was enough to break whatever control we had left. We ran as fast as we could. Behind us, footsteps followed, fast and heavy, crashing through branches without hesitation. I could hear him gaining on us, and the sound made my chest tighten in panic. I did not dare look back, because I knew that if I saw him closer, I might freeze, and stopping even for a second felt like a death sentence. When we finally broke through the trees and reached the road, we quickly got into Daniel's car. We drove away as fast as we could, leaving the canyon behind, but the fear stayed with us the entire drive. We barely spoke on the way to the police station. Every sound made us flinch, and Daniel kept checking the mirrors, convinced we were being followed. I sat stiff in my seat, replaying the image of the body over and over, unable to push it away. At the station, we told everything exactly as it happened. The officers listened, took notes, and went out to the canyon with flashlights and patrol cars. We waited, holding on to each other, trying to stay calm. When they came back, their faces told the story before they spoke. They found nothing. No body, no blood, no signs of anything unusual. They asked careful questions, suggesting stress or imagination, without accusing us directly. I felt frustrated and scared because I knew what I saw, and the fact that it was gone made it worse, not better. Over time, the incident became something we talked about less and less, and eventually, neither of us wanted to relive it constantly. Daniel and I are still together to this day. Years later, we were sitting together watching a crime program, barely paying attention when the tone of the interview changed. The man on screen spoke calmly, methodically, recounting how he had murdered dozens of women, until the journalist asked him if he had ever been on the verge of being discovered before being arrested. When he mentioned Provo Canyon, both of us went still. The room felt suddenly very quiet, and every word demanded our attention. He described killing a woman and leaving her in the woods. He talked about hiding when he heard people coming, about watching a young couple walk into the scene, about realizing he would have to kill them, too. He explained how they escaped, how lucky he was, and how he managed to clean everything and leave no evidence behind. He spoke about it like it was a clever move. I felt sick as the realization settled in, slow and heavy. This man was talking about us, about that night, about how close we came to dying. When the interviewer said his name, Ted Bundy, the last piece fell into place, and the fear I thought I had left behind came rushing back stronger than ever. Ted Bundy, was one of the most dangerous serial killers in American history, responsible for the deaths of dozens of women during the 70s. He was known for being charming, intelligent, and trustworthy, which made him even more terrifying. Daniel and I sat in silence after the program ended, both of us fully aware of how thin the line had been between survival and disappearance. We had escaped only because timing worked in our favor. I still think about that night, about how easily things could have gone differently and how close we were to becoming another story told on a...
First time I realized something was wrong with Lisa, I should have left immediately. We had known each other since high school, grown up together. For many years, being with her felt inevitable, like our lives were tied together by default rather than choice. Things started to fall apart when our lives stopped moving in the same direction. I started feeling emotionally closer to someone at work, and that scared me enough to admit the truth to myself. I was no longer in love with Lisa. When I told her I wanted to separate, I expected pain, anger, maybe resentment. What I didn't expect was the way she reacted. Lisa refused to accept the breakup, and her reaction went far beyond sadness. She cried for hours, then screamed, then collapsed into long periods where she barely spoke or moved. She stopped eating regularly and barely slept. I started checking on her out of guilt rather than love. I told myself I was being kind, even though I knew staying close only confused things more. About a week later, she told me she felt physically unwell and had gone to the doctor on her own. When she came back, she sat across from me and said she was pregnant, already a few months along. She said this explained everything and that we had no choice but to stay together. I was stunned, and my first reaction was disbelief mixed with panic, but I didn't accuse her of lying. She cried and said she needed me, that the baby needed us. Against my better judgment, I agreed to try again. We reconciled quickly, moved back into routine, and I even proposed. It felt like the responsible thing to do. Lisa became calmer, focused on the pregnancy, and I threw myself into work to avoid thinking too much. As the weeks passed, small things began to feel off. Lisa always went to medical appointments alone or with relatives, saying it was a private experience and that pregnancy brought up things she wasn't ready to share. She also told me not to look at her stomach because it caused her anxiety, and she asked me to respect that boundary. I did, even though it felt strange. Her belly did grow, and that was enough to quiet my concerns. I told myself I was overthinking it. In the following weeks, there was a lot of tension between us. She was very stressed about the pregnancy until she joined a charity group that rescued stray dogs, which surprised me, because she never liked animals before. She talked about it with intense enthusiasm, saying it gave her purpose and helped her focus on the future. I felt relieved, even proud, because it looked like she was finding balance again. That's where she met Sarah, another pregnant woman who was due around the same time. Lisa talked about her non-stop, and soon Sarah started visiting our apartment. They sat for hours discussing pregnancy, parenting, and future plans. They always talked about how our children would grow up together and be great friends. I met Sarah's husband, and we started having dinner together. I hadn't felt that hopeful in years, and that made me blind. We had never been so happy, even as a couple. Everything was fantastic until the day Lisa gave birth. One morning, a stranger called me, telling me that Lisa had been found on the street holding a newborn baby. When I arrived, there were people gathered around her, whispering and staring. Lisa was sitting on the pavement with the baby pressed against her chest, both of them covered in blood. Her clothes were soaked, her hands were shaking, and her face looked pale and distant, like she wasn't fully there. She kept repeating that the baby was fine, and that everything was okay, even though nothing about the scene looked okay at all. I was angry, confused, and terrified all at once, asking why no one had helped her, and how this could have happened without anyone calling me. Someone had already called an ambulance, and when the paramedics arrived, they tried to take the baby to check him. Lisa reacted immediately, pulling the baby closer, and screaming that no one was allowed to touch him. She refused to stand up, refused to answer questions, and kept insisting that they didn't need a hospital. Watching her fight them felt unreal, like I was looking at someone I didn't fully recognize anymore. The paramedics had to force her onto the stretcher, and I followed the ambulance in my car, my thoughts spinning out of control. I kept telling myself that births could go wrong, that shock did strange things to people, but deep down, I knew this behavior wasn't normal. At the hospital, everything moved fast, but not in a reassuring way. Doctors separated Lisa from the baby despite her protests, and security had to intervene again because she refused to calm down. A doctor finally pulled me aside and spoke carefully, choosing words that already sounded wrong before I fully understood them. He said Lisa showed no physical signs of pregnancy or childbirth, no signs of labor, no signs of recovery, nothing that matched her story. I argued, raised my voice, insisted there had to be a mistake, but the doctor didn't waver. Not long after that, police officers arrived and asked to speak with me. They asked about Sarah, and the moment they said her name, my stomach dropped. One of them told me that Sarah had been found dead in her home earlier that day. She had been murdered, her abdomen had been cut open, and her baby was gone. They told me that Lisa was the last person to see Sarah alive, that phone records and messages confirmed it. They told me the baby Lisa brought in matched Sarah's pregnancy timeline, not Lisa's. I felt dizzy, like the floor was tilting under my feet. The investigation moved quickly, and there was no room left for denial. Medical tests confirmed that Lisa had never been pregnant at all. The growing belly, the appointments, the symptoms, all of it had been fabricated. The baby wasn't ours, he was Sarah's. Police explained how Lisa had planned everything in advance. The fake pregnancy to keep me from leaving, the charity group to meet vulnerable women, the careful choice of Sarah, because they were supposed to be due at the same time. Every step had been calculated, patient, and deliberate. When I was finally allowed to see Lisa, it was through a glass partition at the police station. She looked exhausted but calm, and when she spoke, she didn't sound desperate. She said she had done what she had to do, and that this was the only way we could have a family. Hearing her say that made my chest tighten in a way I can't properly explain. The baby was returned to Sarah's family, and I never tried to see him again. Court hearings followed, and I attended them all, listening as the crime was described in full detail. Each time, it felt like the air was being pushed out of my lungs. But I stayed silent because there was nothing left to say. Lisa was sentenced to death. I didn't feel relieved for justice. I didn't feel like anything had been resolved. It felt like the ending to a story I never agreed to be a part of. I think constantly about the signs I ignored and the moments I explained away because facing the truth would have been uncomfortable. I trusted someone completely, and that trust was used to destroy another family. Lisa Montgomery was an American woman convicted of murdering Bobby Joe Stinnett in 2004 by strangling her and cutting her abdomen open to steal her unborn baby. Montgomery had pretended to be pregnant for months and used that lie to gain Sten's trust before attacking her in her home. The baby survived and was returned to the family, while Montgomery was arrested the same day and later in 2021 sentenced to death, becoming the first woman executed by the U.S. federal government in nearly 70 years.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe or follow for more stories on Fun Tales for All.